Well, this completes the end of the second week of your readings. The talk that I'm going to give is a response to Augustine's foolish Christians. Let me set this up first by giving you the context of the text which we have excerpted for us by the editor. Augustine writes these 3 chapters in Book 1 of the literal interpretation of the book of Genesis. The book itself, the work itself, includes 12 different books. This work goes to over 330 pages. It is the 3rd time in his career that he writes about this particular book of Scripture. He finds it fascinating and absolutely important. And what he doesn't even interpret the whole of this text of Genesis. As he says later on, the book starts at the beginning and goes to the time that Adam is removed from paradise. Let me present what I think Augustine's position really is. The position is that human beings have been given, the world has been created by God, the world of nature. Human nature has been given the powers by which to understand nature. But there has to be an understanding that there are 3 types of nature, or 3 degrees of nature. There is that nature which is below us, which is most fitting to our mode of understanding. There is that nature which is equal to us, which is human nature. It's much more difficult to understand, but much more worthy of understanding. And beyond that, there's the nature of that which is beyond nature, the divine, the supernatural, the metaphysical. Each of these can be investigated in some way by the powers of reason, and God intended them to be, according to Augustine, studied by the powers of reason. But it's very important for us, if we're to get back to that paradise that Adam had been kicked out of, is that we know more things about the divine. And God, in his wisdom and his grace, has given us 3 things, according to Augustine, that would allow us to be able to make that journey back to paradise. First, he has given us a mediator, which he refers to in the text, the God-man, who represents us and offers himself in salvation and sacrifice for us, for our salvation. He gives us the church, and he gives us the scriptures, by which we can learn the ways of God. This is what Augustine thinks. So the danger that the foolish Christian has done is he's cut off that way of salvation, or openness to the truth, for that intelligent non-Christian. And he's done it because he's arrogant. That's what he means by presumptuous. He thinks, because he understands some word of Scripture, that he understands the whole of Scripture. And he denies the very evident powers of reason. And what Augustine wants to hold is nature, since God created the world, God created our knowing powers, and God created Scripture, since they have the same author, they can't be in contradiction. And so he says, I'm going to offer a solution to this problem. And here, let me read the text that I think is the most important part of the text. This is my 3rd part. I read this part of the text, and I was stopped in my tracks. Augustine says a few things which I think are just amazing. Let me read the text now. For thinking about and observing such foolishness, to the greatest extent possible, I have brought forth and made clear the meaning of the book of Genesis from its texts, which have been made purposely obscure, that we may ponder them deeply, all the while not rashly declaring for one interpretation to the prejudice of another, potentially better explanation, so that every reader of Genesis may be able to choose in according with his own level of expertise the understanding of that which he can grasp. And when he cannot understand sacred Scripture, let him give honor to God, all the while mistrusting himself. The thrust of this text says a couple of things. God purposely wrote in a way that would cause us to ponder. He wrote obscurely. He wrote to cause us to think. He wrote to cause us to ask questions. He wasn't writing a journalistic article which has to be clear so that the author can communicate very clearly a message that could be understood by the reader. This is a difficult message. It is to understand the things about those things which are above us. He had to write in such a way that we wouldn't immediately, rashly think that we have understood them, but that in fact we would read in such a way that we questioned our own knowledge. We questioned what we had just heard. We questioned the truth of what we had previously believed. This, I think, is what is the most important part of a liberal education. It is something that you have to do in Scripture because God uses words for us to understand that are derived from human interactions with nature. But those same words, when they're used by God, are used to describe something mysterious, something metaphysical, something supernatural, something wondrous. Somehow God believes that he can communicate using human words divine mysteries. What Augustine thinks his task is to stop Christians from falling into foolishness is for them to be able to read Scripture in such a way that it is fit for each human given their own level of expertise. And they need to strive to try to understand it, and they need a guide. And Augustine thinks, in the 3 works he wrote on this, that he could give them a guide. So, in conclusion, what is he saying? He's saying reading isn't very easy. But the harder the reading is, the more worthwhile it is for your education. Well, this is the end of this discussion, but I hope to welcome you soon when you come to the campus of Catholic University of America. Thank you.